Trent, how are you this morning?
I am great. How are you
You
doing?
got the Monday blues?
No? Mm-mm. Today's been a slow start, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
Got
in
my
the interest of
beverage
full
in the cup.
transparency, what's actually in that mug?
Wouldn't you like to know? Y'all.
I heard
so,
a can crack.
Yeah, so there's pop in here, and I said pop because I'm from Michigan. I will not say soda or soda water. So it's pop. It's not that I don't like coffee. I don't prefer it. I actually get my energy from other sources. Coffee makes me
Like
crash.
the Lord?
Yes, he is the source of my strength. He is. But I don't prefer coffee.
I think Mandy's going to get mad because I made her try black coffee last
Which is
week.
why we need to talk about boundaries
Yeah.
today.
So Trenton, nice excellent segue into our conversation over one coffee and a pop.
That's 7-Up if you're wondering.
A 7-Up, the official pop of Trenton,
Yeah.
or whatever was left in the fridge.
Y'all need to pay me for endorsing y'all.
Yeah.
7-Up.
I bet Pepsi owns them. Or
Yeah,
Coke
I'm
owns
like,
them.
do they even exist?
Yeah, it's still a thing. So boundaries, Trent.
Yeah.
When you hear that word, what does it immediately evoke?
I think of a few things. I think of parameters, guidelines.
Those are just synonyms for the word.
Yeah. Well, you asked me what I thought. No. So I guess what are you really asking me? Besides, sounds like you don't want synonyms.
Well, I guess when I first hear it, I think I initially think of being a teenager and my relationship with my parents. You know, that's where when I hear boundaries, I think of like parental rules around my life. Not necessarily in a negative sense, but just that's, I guess, the first image I have is like curfew and how I use my cell phone, things like that. That's when I guess when I hear boundaries, that's the gut level.
I see.
Yeah.
I would say for me, I think of adulthood, and I think of, and the reason I think of adulthood, I think of just learning how to be a thriving, functioning adult, and interact with people well.
Yeah.
And I would say in ways that add value to both or all parties involved, yourself and then the other people around you. That's probably where my head goes when I hear boundaries.
It is interesting, which is cool that automatically you have, it sounds like a positive association. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wouldn't say mine was negative, but I guess my association was a bit more with what you can and can't do.
Exactly.
Yeah, not so much which I do think, there's definitely boundaries in my life as an adult, but just that gut level when I hear this word, boundaries.
Yeah. I gotta say, this is really weird sitting this close to you, only looking at you.
Yeah.
Know that there's a camera here.
Yeah.
I'm like, do I look at this or do I look at you? What do you want me to do?
No, you're fine. Either way.
I just look here.
Yeah. I remember I took one of my first classes was in college, was a junior college in Austin, and it was a speech class, but I don't remember, I'm trying to remember the specifics, but there was a day where they talked about it was like nonverbal cues. And the assignment the guy gave us, the professor, was we were just supposed to go throughout this building and kind of break all of those nonverbal cues, like with strangers. And then so one person in the group would break it and then the other people would observe. So like eye contact, like with a stranger and not saying anything. Or we would get in the elevators and even if there was space, get like really close to people. It was actually a lot of fun.
Did they say anything? The people, or did
sometimes,
they just adjust?
Yeah, because I stared this girl down in the library real hard, and she had enough. It was like, "Can I help you with something?"
Yeah.
Yeah. But the elevators facing thing always is interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like that unspoken rule. You don't be friendly. Like you're not supposed to be friendly, which I don't get. If you're going to be in that space, you might as well make a friend.
Yeah. I had more fun though in like the not actually talking to them about it, but just like being really close, physical. But boundaries.
That's when I would have passed gas.
So what do you think? So as you use the word thriving, so in your adult life, how have boundaries played a role in your thriving? Or maybe I can definitely think of like some tough seasons where maybe I had less boundaries than I needed in certain areas. So it's like a really comprehensive term. So you see it more in terms of like your time and in relational aspects, like where all does that fall for you?
Yeah, I think time is like the larger context in which I think there's a necessity for boundaries, because that's the one thing that I've learned to value a little bit more the older I get, simply because it's like you don't get it back.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if I just have the proper like perspective or appreciation or value of priorities, things that are precious, especially if you I don't know, we might live in a different or more like or engaged relationships for if we just realize that, or at least for me personally, I don't think anything happens by coincidence. And then like this day, we'll never get it back. Not to be doom and gloom, but there's like each day is I hope should be special or meaningful. And so because of that, time is something you can't get back. Each day it really is a gift. And because of that, something that is valuable or is a gift, I think you just approach differently. So there is a need for boundaries, because like there are all types of, everybody has needs. I have needs, you have needs. And if there's not any type of like guideline of like, hey, it's okay to acknowledge these things and to not be demeaning in like voicing them.
Yeah.
But there is, I think also at the back of my head, I'm hearing like, no is not a curse word, know?
So kind of the time guideline or boundary bleeds into the relational boundary.
Yeah, for sure.
Because probably a big, we give our time to things that aren't necessarily requesting it, but probably it's other people that make the most requests of our time. Which, if I could take all the time back that I wasted on just useless things.
Yeah. And I have a wife. We both are married. We have young kids, and there is an opportunity cost for not having, boundaries.
Yeah. What about for ministry?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think there sometimes, not here, we have some hard workers and people who are invested, but we forget that there's the priesthood of all believers, that all of us have been empowered through the Spirit. We're preaching through it through Ephesians. Plug, if you haven't been tuning in, go listen to it. It's really helpful. But like we all are empowered. Like I think sometimes in the past there's been this paradigm that the pastor or the full-time staff is the person with the it factor that needs to be all things for all people at all times, and that's just not biblical. And it's not godly. I think it's a recipe for all kinds of unhealthy, even I would say sinful things to kind of be set up to happen in your heart, in relationships. So like in ministry, really empowering people equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. Yeah.
Which it is interesting, just this idea of boundary in general, and this is not unique to me. I heard somebody else bring it up, but like literally sin entered the world the first time somebody violated the one boundary. So living without boundaries in your life is rooted in sinfulness, because God is like, hey, here's all the good things. Here's this one boundary I don't want you to step over. And of course, we as humans are like,
we suck.
Yeah. Which then I think even just, coming up in ministry and being around ministry most of my life, I feel like I always kind of heard the language like the job never stops. It could be any hours of the day. And now the longer I do that, the more I kind of want to push back on that. Not that, it is awesome to have this role in people's life as a pastor. And, when the worst things happen, when the poop hits the fan, you're going to call your pastor, and that's an incredible responsibility. But I think as the longer I do it, the more freedom I have. So like, I'm going to turn off my phone, and God can take care of the world.
Exactly.
And if the worst happens, I'm praying it doesn't. But I'll get back with you the next morning.
Exactly.
We'll make those visits, we'll make those calls, and so that I think gives me more freedom to sleep and also enjoy my family. Those kind of things. Putting that boundary, and so I think we can all agree boundaries are probably a good gift from the Lord and not a restrictive gift.
Sometimes I wonder why we are so hesitant to enact them.
Probably feel selfish.
On
some level.
I wonder why though.
I don't know. I think there is a large. I like sociology and stuff. There's this larger cultural narrative, ever since like the '60s in the counterculture of like reevaluating all the boundaries from the past, that throw off all the norms and stuff that were just restrictive or kind of from an older time. And so I'm sure that kind of bleeds into consciousness a bit, that boundaries are restrictive by nature, or we're missing out on something if we are too rigid in our lives.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a product of where I fall in my sibling order. I'm a rule follower. I like things being structured, and I find great comfort in things having an order to them. I'm pro boundary.
Yeah. That's helpful that you brought in like that perspective of like birth order. I'm the youngest, and so of 3 boys, and I would say because the age gap was so wide, boundaries were probably a lot more relaxed by the time I was coming up in the house. I don't know. I've just really come to appreciate them as a person who appreciates like space to just be.
Yeah.
I've definitely come more so as an adult. Have definitely come to see just the personal value it brings to me to be able to like have boundaries, because in having that, then I'm free to like have a little bit more margin in other areas, especially as an introvert or our chart. I have extroverted. I've developed extroverted skills, but how our charge is generally.
You can infiltrate our ranks.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. I can hang with the best of them. Especially now that I'm married, we've kind of swapped a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Shelly's more introverted, and I've become more extroverted. But at the end of the day,
just kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah. Check me out on a Sunday. I'm a hard introvert. Not a lot of conversations, nap, silence, not a lot of noise going on. But anyway, I forget where I was going. I think even as a youngest sibling, who the cultural narrative can think we're spoiled and we get our way because there's not boundaries.
Yeah, I have a younger sibling.
Yeah, it's a little bit. There are some dynamics that might be true in that. As a, as a person that has a lot of those, can have a lot of those youngest sibling tendencies, I have grown. The point is, long way around the barn to the front door. I appreciate boundaries. And I've learned the hard way. And the hard way was literal when I thought I had to do everything, be everywhere. This is probably more so in college.
Yeah.
Like with student organizations.
Yeah, college is an experiment in learning how little the body requires sleep.
Yeah, I don't know, just not fully able to be present. No. I would be awake, but kind of zombie-like, probably a little bit more irritable, stressed, way uptight, taking myself way too seriously. And so I just learned internally that's just not, I don't think, a life that we've been designed as believers to have. And it's so much more boring. It's so much more stress.
There's freedom in the structures.
So much freedom.
So I guess a natural question I go to is like, what's the process for figuring out what is a good boundary line? Because I've definitely known people that like do like place boundaries to me in a weird spot that like I don't get this. I do feel like you're kind of maybe missing out on some things, or you're being very dogmatic about this thing that's supposed to help you, but you're treating it as universal law. So what? I guess if you could, like, how do you figure out where those boundaries need to be?
So there's one question that when you said that, as far as rigidity, I was thinking, I think the underlying question is, if your schedule doesn't go that way, or if things kind of pan out a different way, how open are you to margin? Because margin really causes you to acknowledge in a practical way that you're not in control.
Yeah.
And if you're uptight, and if you're having these really rigid boundaries, and when they're crossed, there's not evidence of like the fruit of the spirit.
Yeah.
And you're kind of a jerk.
Which I guess it depends on what boundary, what area of life, not just like, my time got a little used up, but I mean, there's some boundaries that, hard line.
But really, I think a universal kind of parameter, and this is kind of loosely because they're like no situation is the same. So I would say, if you're kind of reflecting like, is this about me being in control, or is this really about me valuing something else because I said I'd be here for somebody else, and by this boundary being crossed in the like context of time, now I'm having to, it's kind of like a domino effect. I think that would be a helpful measure, and not so much of like did I devote this much time? You got to hold it loosely.
Yeah.
I've learned to hold it a little bit more loosely. And is there a sense of you accomplishing what you've been designed to accomplish, right? If you aren't able to do the things that you've been designed to do or having to do, then it may be a question of, okay, let's look at where the boundaries are, what needs to be adjusted. At least that's what kind of guides me.
Yeah. So I think I can kind of see like some different seasons in my life too where things kind of needed to be adjusted. Like there was things, either from just life situation or age. Because I tend to think through my time in ministry, and I started doing youth ministry when I was 20, and being a 20-year-old guy in authority and having 17, 18-year-old females that on some level, not like I was the one in charge, but
Sure.
it's a positional authority.
Sure.
You are in that spiritual
There's a
role too.
responsibility.
Like I remember, it was something my dad impressed upon me because he was a minister and could regale me with stories about men who violated those roles. And so I very much kept very hard boundaries, not just on like physical space and presence, but even just like emotional relationships.
Sure.
Like, I didn't have any of their numbers. I wouldn't respond to text messages, any of those things. Mm-hmm. But then as I got some of that more age, got longer into my marriage, I felt a bit more freedom and, hey, I can give some spiritual advice, to a 15-year-old now that I'm 28,
Right.
Felt a little more safety in those things. And so I see some of those boundaries kind of moving. And even, thinking about like being an unmarried college student versus being married, just my friendships even with peers,
Right.
that boundary kind of moved to different places once, hey, I found the woman that this is my woman for the rest of my life. My friendships are going to look slightly different with the opposite sex than they had before. And so it is hard to like tell people like, here's all the boundaries you need to have. But it is, to me, a lot of things just go back to intentionality. You need to think through how you're moving through life.
Yep.
Yeah, and actually have a thought process behind, this is how I'm going to use my time. These are how I'm going to interact with relationships. This is good for me. This is not good for me. Establish those things and maybe even articulate them. Not that I've done it. I haven't like written things down, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of things. Me and Emily, there are specifics we've talked about, like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. So I kind of know in my head, like, okay, I'm crossing this line that I know I should not be crossing. So if you've never articulated it, don't have it defined, I feel like it gives us that bad gray area as a person where we can kind of trespass but not feel too bad about it yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As you were talking, it's probably also helpful to have these in some type of community.
Yeah.
And to kind of bounce these off from people who can see blind spots, who know, sin proclivities, all those things. And I also want to, show some love to our either folks who are divorced or single.
Yeah.
Because I think it's easy, or culturally the perception is like there's a lot of emphasis given to like, well, I have to have boundaries because I'm married or because I have children. Well, single people are just as valuable, and we don't want to in turn say that because they don't have these parts or aspects of their life, well, you're supposed to be at the church every time the doors are open,
you're
or
so
serving all this
free.
stuff because you're so free. No, you need self-care as well, and boundaries for the single person, I would say, are just as important, because it can be easy to, either, I would say both ditches are potentially vices, where you are isolated and you have a lot of boundary or a lot of like strong awareness of boundaries, or you're just everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
And it's if you haven't noticed, a lot of the Christian walk in life is, how do you dance in tension?
Yeah, that tension.
There's going to be a bit of a pendulum swing, but what is that range, and is that a helpful kind of like space to be in?
And that's why we should all, have healthy evaluation of our life. Definitely, like, the big components of my life right now are being a husband, being a dad, being a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so those are the ones that are obviously easier to speak to, because I've had to think through those dynamics in my life. And so that's, I would just encourage, a healthy evaluation. Like you said, in community, I do think about, I learned so much from my dad. but not everybody had a wise father that,
Exactly.
instilled some of the things, and I've learned a lot from other pastors and mentors as I moved into ministry. And so maybe you haven't had some of those roles in your life. That's why we do have the church. That's why we do home groups. That's why we do have availability in our 9 to 5 to meet and talk with people and to think about things like, you don't. So much of life we always default to trying to figure out by ourselves when we really don't have to. Yeah.
You mentioned, I had 2 questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned your priorities as a husband, a father, and then a minister. Is that the proper
priorities?
order? Yeah.
I don't know. It is interesting, only like 1 year into being a dad. And it's like such it's a different weird love. But I don't know. And I don't think it's a disservice to how much I love my daughter. My wife's my partner for life. And one of my goals as a parent is to raise a child that grows up to be an independent adult. That has to meet Jesus on her own. Maybe we'll get married unless God calls it, at some point. But like me and Emily, that's the primary relationship of my life, in my opinion, at this point. So I
Sounds like boundaries.
Yeah, I do. It is weird, like that romantic spousal love that I have for Emily, and not that one's lesser or greater. This love I have for this little person we're raising now. But to me, it kind of, and I don't know, maybe there's a smarter person who's parsed this out better. It kind of feels in different categories for me, my parental love versus my spousal love. And I think, I'm going to grow old with him. So I do probably think in terms of husband, dad, pastor. I don't know if that's not a completely thought out position. I like to articulate things
in the ground.
that I've had enough time, and I don't think I've had enough time being 1 year into fatherhood to, the kind of the classic question. Me and Emily were actually talking about this at some point. There was some like thing on Facebook or something about like if you had some weird scenario where it's like you have to save your child or your spouse, like how, and I'm like, well, I was like, I think I would pick my child because I love Emily so much and I know what Emily would want, so it's like, but it's always an impossible scenario. Like you're never going to face that choice. But anyways.
I said I had 2 questions. I forgot what the other one was.
It was probably really insightful that would have
Probably
changed everybody's lives.
I would say, like, what's the action item? Like, after people hearing this conversation, so what? Now what?
Yeah. I don't know. We should have gotten together beforehand and, like, listed, like, time, relationships, or, like, figured out the categories that people should think through. Yeah. But I think, that's... we both mentioned Emotional Healthy Spirituality. It's a book, and it came out of a ministry of a church in Queens, New York. And since I read the book, I've kind of looked at their church and seen some of their things. And one of the things I really like about their church is that one of their core values is being monastic, which is kind of this older word. You think monasteries and stuff, but how they kind of explain it is that everything in kind of modern life is geared to make you rush through it really fast. And so one of their values as a church is trying to encourage people to slow down their lives, which part of that aspect is just you got to slow down if you want to meet with the Lord. But I think there's an aspect of that too that, like, I don't know if we just don't think enough, and I, we're in a modern time where, I'm not waking up at sunset to make sure my family has food. Right. So we do have margin in almost every career. And I know some people, there's the person that's working 3 jobs to try to make ends meet. And I get that. But if that's not you, like, there needs some, I think I said it yesterday in the sermon, like, we need contemplative time to evaluate what's going on in our lives. And that was one of the things I liked about that book, is just kind of slow down to think about these things. Because I do, like most things in life, it's intentionality. It's not just going to happen just because you want it to happen. It takes effort. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Which, in one of the other things out of that book, and we've talked about here, I think is before you came on staff, but is the idea of a rule of life. Establishing, like, Yeah, like we said, maybe you haven't written it down or articulated it, but if you have it, then you kind of know, like, hey, I'm kind of veering away from what, on my best day, I know what's good for me versus what I want to compromise on in the moment.
Right.
I think it's good to, if you can think through those before you're in the situation. I think you're setting yourself up for success.
That's good.
Yeah.
I would say a measure is how comfortable are you saying no? Like, how do you process saying no? So there's two parts. Like, how do you interact with the word no, and not just no to be, difficult.
Yeah.
But do you have a healthy relationship or level of comfort with saying no?
Yeah.
And maybe starting with asking people who interact with you, like, hey, what are some boundaries that you've seen me kind of live out in my life, or where are some places that I might consider thinking through some other boundaries. It doesn't need to be super heavy or super difficult. I think a conversation and awareness and openness, because different things come in and out of our lives that have different demands, but where I think the place of caution is 5 months, 5 years down the road, you're doing the same thing. Kind of the narrative is the same. How you doing? I'm just tired. I'm just trying to survive. Or I'm just struggling.
Yeah.
That might be it might be hopefully a sign that you might want to, there might be a conversation or some discovery. And I would say listening to your body.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean sleeping in for 12 hours, but our body, I think God has created such unique bodies that are, if you just think about all the systems that just kind of operate on their own, and just the intricacies, veins, arteries, capillary, like, our bodies can kind of help tell us a lot of, particularly if we are going too fast, and probably if you're going too slow, if you just, lethargic, lack of energy all the time.
Yeah. We are a whole person.
We are.
That's another whole talk.
Yeah.
Diet, sleep. I feel like since I'm in a role with, teenagers and college students a lot, so I'm in this place a lot with, whether they ask me to or not, telling them what they should be doing. And definitely for college students, probably the number one thing I'm always like, you need a sleep schedule. Like, you are not doing well. And because that can, affect your spiritual life, because, if you're not sleeping, then you're probably not going to wake up and go to church or go to home group or go to Bible study or whatever it is. So it has all these, second and third order effects on your life. And so I'm like, what time are you going to bed? That's like my number one spiritual insight question.
Hard. That is so hard because I'm a night owl.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The creative juices and just the mental clarity generally happens for me most consistently.
But are you getting consistent sleep?
Yeah. I am now. I don't do it every night.
That's good.
And I don't do it every night. I've recently started to go to sleep a little bit earlier than I usually prefer. But yeah, come talk to us. We're here.
You can have coffee or 7-Up in a conversation.
Yeah, but seriously, I mean that. I think we've kind of loosely used the term from stage, but personally, I do see myself as one of the pastors here, and they do too. And would love to kind of enter into life and help you thrive. The Lord has handpicked us to be here. Jeremiah 3:15. I'll give you pastors according to my own heart. He's placed us here to be part of your life. So hopefully you will take a risk, a good risk, and invite us into that with you. We don't have all the answers. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I won't get it right all the time, but I'm gonna try. And life is more fun together. Yeah. And so let's talk about it. Let's tackle about it.
Yeah. Which one of the things I love about our job is, an aspect of my job is I do get to sit and think about the Word of God and how it applies to life. And I know, some professions, it does eat up a big chunk of time, and other time has to be spent with the family, with eating. And so not that I have 8 degrees or I'm a professional on every single aspect of life, but there are some things where being in a pastoral role has given me time to interact with a lot of people and see kind of similar patterns and in struggles we have, and also to literally like some of my day is spent like I'm going to read the Word of God and then I'm going to sit and think about it. And so, and I think that helps us at times have some insight in how people can, just go through life in God's ordered world in a healthy way.
Just stop it.
Yeah, that's my number one advice. Stop it. Yeah. But I'm out of coffee. I don't know how your 7-Up's holding out.
I can finish it. I'm sure the people love to hear me slurp the rest of this.
As slow as possible.
What's the name of that where you watch people eat? What's that called? It's like a video and there's like a high capacity, like highly sensitive microphone that hears. You've not seen it?
Oh, I don't like the sound.
I think it's like ASMR or something like that. Don't Google that in case it's something
weird,
ungodly. But yeah. I need to find that. But yeah, you literally just watch people prepare a meal, and then like you watch them eat it. It's oddly satisfying.
I don't like the sound of that. Slurp my coffee just to make Emily mad.
Let's do this for her. Emily, this is for you.